Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome once again, David Cranmer Underdown. How are you tonight, David?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Well, before we start the show, just a little bit of heads up for as far as the channels are going. I want to just explain. I am still broadcasting on McDuff Lives 2, which is a backup for McDuff Lives 1, which is now in 2 weeks YouTube jail. And so that prompted me to make Rumble my new primary channel. The one hitch that I've run into is that there was already a McDuff Lives channel. It's the one that has a space between the two words. Now, I thank you for signing up for that, and I'm not going to, I'll probably, when I can get access to it, try to do something to rename it. But the one that we're broadcasting on is called McDuff Lives, all one word. And hopefully that's on tonight. I will ask anyone that's watching over there to let me know if you can by coming over to the chat room either on Facebook or McDuff Lives 2 on YouTube. Phew, I think that's about it. All right. And, but it's growing pains and I'm learning as we do it. But I made a statement. I'm going to change to Rumble, and that's what I'm doing. And so I appreciate your patience. We have two shows already under our belts, and Rovier or Hervoye Morovich yesterday was really a fantastic show. And then the first show was me reading from David Livingstone's book, Ordo ab Chao, about the Cliveden set. And that was also a very, very successful broadcast. So thank you all for making this change and for bearing with me as I smooth out the details. Well, speaking of smoothing out, is President Biden going to smooth out our financial system, or is our financial system going to be teetering and tottering for a while and kind of pull a building 7 on us?
I don't have a lot of faith in the Joe Biden's financial acumen, but you know, I'm I look at Janet Yellen, as the Treasury Secretary, and she's somebody that she was the um, Fed chairman before, and I just I don't see I don't know I just struggle because I just think of what I learned in my freshman year economics class in college, and just like what adding to money supply does to inflation and things like that, and she says the exact opposite. So she's been in all the high positions, but I don't know. It's um as I've said before, I'm somebody that really studied economics and finance, and I really love doing financial statement analysis and work like that. And just I learned very early that you can make a lot of you can really change the picture of something just with some minor adjustments to either interest rates or to the duration of how long your projections are, and you can really change the picture dramatically based on modeling. And so I'm skeptical on all the financial information, and I don't think that the president of the United States is really the person that is driving a lot of the financial policies.
Well, wait a minute now. He's got the army. He's got, can he not just walk up to them with bayonets and say, "Fix this, God damn it"? I
Can't,
guess not anymore. It's kind of like when when I guess whoever it was, Dick Cavett asked President Clinton, could did he go into Area 51? Said no, no, they won't let me go in there. So he's the president. So I guess it's above his pay grade, maybe.
it could be. I don't know. I feel like yeah, I don't know. I mean, I followed it a little bit, but it's really sparked me to go more into like looking at historical financial banking arrangements and partnerships, and just trying to illustrate that a lot of the same players are involved. They may have different names, their institutions, and maybe shuffled the money to different nations or different entities, but a lot of the same sort of families and interests I think are represented, just with maybe a little bit different branding.
Mm. But what about the banks? Are the banks going to start tumbling, or are we just going to print more money?
They,
Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah. I mean, that's been the policy of my entire life, is just to just use quantitative easing or add to the money supply, and it doesn't seem to, as Janet Yellen famously said, that inflation's transitory. And, even when you do, you know, trillion plus deals for warp speeds, or seemingly write these enormous, you know, military aid programs to the Ukraine, you know, it, it doesn't seem to have much of an effect. But again, like I never lived, like I just remember, like going to my grandparents' house, and they would save like they would have like a million rubber bands and like pie tins, and they saved boxes and all this stuff. And they always said, well, we lived through a depression. We had that experience. So for us, we know to save resources and whatnot. So I never really had that personal experience. But that's what I've honestly been in fear of really my whole life, is that when I sort of was looking at like the debts and the deficits and whatnot, and just sort of doing just basic equations about like what is owed per citizen, and how much you would have to earn and to have an income to pay off a tax burden and whatnot, and the numbers just have never made sense, and they
Yeah.
just keep adding to it. But again, like there's a little bit of inflation, and I feel like they use the gas prices as a real gets a lot of attention for affecting the majority of people. That's like a real inflation sort of measuring stick for people. But there's you look at like housing, and the housing prices have gone up, and for a lot of people that's a real plus, because if you have bought into something and you have a mortgage and you feel like your assets going up, then you feel like you've made a wise investment, even though that's technically in an inflationary event, is to have the cost of housing to increase. But again, it's like it just depends on your individual situation. But there's a lot of psychology that goes into the markets, and of course, a lot people want to feel like their retirements are secure, and there's the private, and then the 401ks and IRAs and whatnot, or pension accounts, and people want those things to be strong and to feel secure that they can have a retirement. And so those are all things that are worth defending. But if the solution is just to print unlimited money, which is what it seems like has been the solution, it's just you know I don't know. I mean, maybe it can go on indefinitely. I've been wrong my whole life with my analysis, so I'm the last person to ask.
Oh my.
Yeah.
No, the thing is, you're still grounded in reality, and I think they've just detached themselves from, real assets and real, you know, everything is derivatives and, bets upon bets and counter bets and, hedging this and how much can I make on this currency, transfer thing. And the problem is that they keep writing notes to each other saying, I owe you this and you owe me that, and I owe you this and this and this and this. And now there's, what is it? Something like $400 trillion worth of paper out there, and only, about $100 trillion worth of assets in the whole world to cover it, or maybe even, a tenth of that, if I just guessing at that number. But the disaster that it looks like, and some people are saying, look at these graphs, like LaRouche has his graph with this going this way and this going that way, and saying, hey, we're at the end of this. It's all going to crash. Well, yet so you've, again, as you said yourself, you really do have quite an expertise from not only from your education but also from your work experience in and just a love of following these issues that tells me that I'm not going to worry that it's going to be 1929 tomorrow morning. And the emphasis that you give on psychology and the psychological manipulation of the masses, especially through things like the gasoline price, which I think is a very much of a bellwether, as you say, is is effective. And are we not just saying that Bernays was right in his book Propaganda, that Lippmann was right, that all of the round table, egghead, New England Ivy League presidents, the members of the Manhattan uh, uh, Project, and countless others that we've studied and studied some of them very hard to try to understand them. But are they not all just detaching themselves from reality and believing in a future that they have decided is inevitable? And therefore, they're willing to put all their chips in on this future that has been kind of pre-programmed for us through science fiction and through, things like Kurzweil and the singularity and all of these science fiction movies and all, trying to get us pre-programmed to accept this technological serfdom that they have planned for us. And is it it's almost like the Smelly Robe Club.
Hmm.
And once you're in the Smelly Robe Club, you can't leave. You're bad things will happen, and it won't just be you. It'll be your family. It'll be a mafia style of vendetta. It's be awful, and you'll end up with a sword up your butt like Mohammed, like Gaddafi,
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. It's so unreal to us that to the normal people of our country and our world that it just that's you see that on Netflix. That's not real. Don't
Yeah.
believe that. It's not possible. But what I think is going on here, especially when somebody that is really like yourself says that this psychological factors are really huge, and it's really that takes away your ability to predict what's going to happen from your traditional training in economics.
Right.
So this is a huge explosion of evidence in favor of exposing and you know getting rid of this thinking, this crazy thinking about how there's this technological future, and we're the smart people, and all of the 99% of them are just responsive to pain or pleasure, and their lives are going to be what is it, painful, brutish, and short, or whatever the quote is from our good friend Hume. No,
Mm.
what was that?
I don't
Leviathan guy, Hobbes. That was Hobbes.
know.
uh, Okay, enough for me. No, but that's what I think the answer is they're all in. They're just completely push. If whatever they have to do, and maybe this SIV bank thing, is an example because obviously there was some crazy investments, but I haven't looked into it enough
Yeah.
to go there. But
It,
okay, your turn.
yeah. Well, it's they try to use again like a very kind of lowest common denominator explanation. They just say they got affected by treasury bills and rates rising, and but again, it's like I don't know that bank specifically. What I've been listening about it is they do a lot of secretive transactions with just like numbered accounts, and it's a lot of what's called like napkin deals or pen deals where that, it's not officially like drawn out. It's a lot of speculative investment, and but again, it's like it's almost like the Swiss banking where they have secrecy. So it's so whenever that's the situation where I feel like, as you said, just doing like traditional financial statement analysis and looking at the balance sheet and what are the assets, what are the liabilities, what are their go through the ratio analysis, things like that, that you would like common things that you would use to sort of do a evaluation. When there's when there's so much information that's secret or not ever talked about, or I think the analysts aren't even aware of, like that's why it's just complicated, and you can just get lost in the details of analysis and trying figure out, well, this person was in this position and whatnot, and they should they should have been seeing this or seen it coming or acted as a better steward of the accounts they're managing. And but I again, like it's all off book, but I really look at things like the histories of wars. A lot of it is the dividing the assets of the conquered, which includes treasury, intellectual property, human capital, all the people. Like, we hear a lot about paperclip, and we brought in these German people, but to me what that really was that was a resource from a conquered country, that they had expertise and technical knowledge in specific areas of value, and they were dividing people between the Russians. This is what the Tehran Conference and the Cairo Conference, they were dividing intellectual property, and also human capital of people that were experts and professionals. And one of the groups that I think is really important is the intelligentsia category, the philosophers, the psychologists. I think that they have had a massive effect, and it falls into what we've studied with the Reinhard Gehlen, with as far as its intelligence, its management of communications and information warfare. And these are the people that are they're used in roles like managing a television or a radio station, or running a magazine or a newspaper or whatnot, or being a writer or an author. But these people, not all of them, because again, they've made it confusing. But when you talk about Edward Bernays, for example, like he's somebody that's just so interesting, because just today, because one of the characters I think is really a kind of top of the heap information person is Steve Bannon right now. And I think that he comes from the William Buckley conservative school. I mean, he didn't go to Yale or whatnot, but I think they divided information. It was called the Port Huron Statement with Tom Hayden and the SDS, and that became the liberal kind of the liberal thought. And then they pitted them in a Hegelian dialectic against the conservative movement, which was started by Bill Buckley with the Sharon Statement, with his New Republic and whatnot. And those sort of became the two drivers of the conservative and the liberal movement. And I think that Bannon is sort of the head of that, conservative, quote unquote, conservative Republican messaging. If you want to guess like who's QAnon or whatnot, I would say that Steve Bannon is at least in the room with people that are running that psychological operation. But his partner, his kind of Chinese partner, Miles Kwok, who was just arrested today by the FBI, he was in the 18th floor of the Sherry Netherland. And I know that you've been to New York, and so I have all these. So I had these great trips. We used to go to New York when I was little with my grandparents, and we would have, my mom would get the photos and do all, have all the things to see all the sites and everything. And one of the sites was, we went to the Harry Cipriani's, which is the restaurant in the first floor of the Sherry Netherland, which is a very famous hotel. It's right on the corner of Central Park. It's on the the south east corner. It's right across from the Plaza Hotel, which is very famous, and then the General Motors building was right next door with like the FAO Schwartz, where Tom Hanks does the piano thing in the movie Big, and then the building next to that is the Trump Tower. So when I was little, we would go to the Sherry Netherland, and we had the Bellinis and everything, and it was very exciting. But later, I learned that Edward Bernays lived in the same building. So they had the fire today on the 18th floor where this Miles Kwok lives, and that was is the same building that Edward Bernays lived in with Anna Freud. With his. So again, like right across the street from the Plaza Hotel, which was where Roy Cohn supposedly had his room 322, where he was doing all the compromat operations in the.
That was the 322. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the 322 room, and of course they had Eloise. They did the books of Eloise and they had the portrait. But of course, my memories were we went there for tea time with my grandma. She loved to go to tea. We'd have the little sandwiches and the cookies and tea and everything, and that was my memory of it. But then, of course, it later is acquired by Robert Bass and the Tom Barrack, and he brokers it to Donald Trump. And again, like all these characters that kind of come back are right there. But with the Bernays, he was, he worked for Rockefellers. He worked for United Fruit. He was, famously did the Lucky Strikes and got everybody to smoke. But he's the
Freedom torches.
What's that?
Freedom torches.
Torches of freedom. And the thing,
freedom torches. Yeah.
Yeah. If you watch his movie, he's smart though, because he did it he did it on the he got the socialites to do it. So it's kind of like what would be the influencer class, of now, the popular girls or whatever. Like you always, use the popular young women or whatever. So he got them to have it be a women's liberation where, I'm not going to follow the rules and I'm going to be an individual and make choices for myself. And it was also with the torches, it also synced to the Statue of Liberty because she's, of course, holding the torch. So all these things are thought out in the psychology because he, again, goes to, the drives, what influences somebody to make a decision or to take an action. That's like what he's studying. He's doing it on a mass basis, so it's a mass psychology thing. But I like all that stuff. I mean, I don't want to use it to trick people or manipulate people, but I think it's fascinating to study what, what people's interests are and what they like. And, I think those are good things to study because you can use them in a way to be like a good friend or neighbor or family member if you can relate to people and try to understand them. But you can also do it to make people make bad financial decisions or crave something that they don't need or try to take on a role that's not natural to them where they're never comfortable. So it's like a lot of things, it's a tool. And but as far as like his analysis and the techniques he used, he was a great master. I mean, he deserves to get credit for it. I mean, of course, that it's horrible the overthrows and the genocides and whatnot that were part of it. But as far as his ability to understand like drives of people, I think that's, he should be studied for that.
Well, I have to say, in my reading on Monday of Ordo ab Chao, the section on the Cliveden set, it did mention the Tavistock Institute, and that Bernays and Lippmann were part of the I don't know the board or something of it, and it was their task to get America into World War I. And that to me like blows my mind because the connection from Bernays, which I've thought of as a kind of a Madison Avenue until we really dug in and found the Freud connections, which only came to us a year or so ago, as far as I can remember. But before that, I heard of Bernays,
Hmm.
But I thought of him as somebody that, he's just a really good ad man or something. There's somebody that was the first genius of how to sell stuff, and in a modern sense. But no, I mean, his connection to Tavistock is chilling,
Yeah.
and ties all of this really to the Round Table and the British side of all of this creepiness, as we've seen in so many instances, from the Rockefellers ties to the British security. What was it? The BSC and all of those folks we've talked about. I'm just
Yeah.
mentioning them for folks who are not regular watchers here, but these characters appear again and again in our shows on McDuff Lives. And for instance, this um, well, tell you what, I didn't want to spend the whole night on one topic. And so let me try to interject myself with what I think would be an interesting change for folks, and that is to go into your recent writings in Twitter on the
Mhm.
subject of connections between Detroit
Yeah.
and the burgeoning Nazi movement in Germany in the 30s. And folks don't know much about people like Hermann Goering, for instance, and that's a connection to Ford and Detroit that's totally unknown. But
Yeah.
this kind of just below the surface information is managed in a way that people don't see it. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the denizens of Detroit and as what you've been writing about lately on Twitter.
Okay. Well, as I've said, my family is, connected to a lot of this stuff, and it goes back. It's it's been a very, it's always like very personal talking about this stuff because it's nobody explained it to me. But it's just all done through basically personal relationships. But if you look at like a Hermann Goering, he was his first wife was Swedish and was a very wealthy. He was a very much a partnered with a lot of the industrialists, and it's and a lot in aviation as well. And with Detroit, Detroit was we're known as the Motor City, but you know one thing that I always try to remember is that a motor is not just used in an automobile; it's also used in an airplane and in other pieces of equipment. And so a lot of aviation came from Detroit, and so there was a lot of partnerships between German, Russian, European, Fiat, all these old European, what became industrialists, like after the Industrial Revolution. There was a lot of partnerships. Like if you look at when Henry Ford, made the Highland Park plant, which is known as the first um, production line and facility for mass production, he had people like the Benz family from Germany came, the Renault family from France came, the Angeli from Fiat. They all came to look at it, and they were all working on things like they were also doing things like racing and performance, and that was all that was a big way that in auto clubs and things like that, and there were aviation clubs, and there was a lot of the elite families would have, one son would want to be in a flying club and invest in aviation and whatnot. And then they would go over to Europe. And that was sort of what I think like Charles Lindbergh's role was. Like he got into to aviation. Of course, his mother is from Detroit. That's something that I I don't I don't know if people don't I don't know. I don't know what people people know. I never thought of Lindbergh as being a Detroiter, but his mom was from here. He grew up in Minnesota. His dad was from Minneapolis, but his mom was from here, and she was from one of those families. She was a lodge in a land, and she was a teacher. She was a chemistry teacher at a school called Cass Tech, which is an important school because Cass Tech had it was a technical school. It was a school that you'd have to qualify to get into. So it took the best students, and they would partner with General Motors and Chrysler and Ford, and they would, teach machine, workshop and things like that. So a lot of people that were became industrialists or people that would have, big engineering roles that came out of this Cass Tech High School. And one of the articles that I sent you that I think that you're alluding to is there was also the Masonic Temple in Detroit, which is the largest Masonic temple in the world, is in Cass Corridor, and it was on Lewis Cass's land. And of course, historically, Lewis Cass was somebody that was from Exeter, New Hampshire, which has a lot of the Gilman family, like the Daniel Coit Gilman, who's a very important person in the history of education in the country. One of the early Skull and Bones. One of the things that I also wanted to touch back on with the Tavistock is that the Tavistock Square was the Duke of Bedford, and that was the Russell family. So the first Russell was John Russell, and he was related to, getting into the Bertrand Russells and all this stuff. It's the same family. And their property in London was Tavistock Square. And that the same Russell family, Tavistock Square, they were the ones that started. It partnered with the OSS. It became business intelligence, but it later kind of morphed into the NATO intelligence. But that Tavistock used these Viennese or psychologists is kind of like for a lot of their programming was directed by Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, and of course Bernays was Sigmund Freud's wife was a Bernays. So I mean, again, it's all the same family, and they're all from these schools. But with Ford and General Motors, they both they both built factories in Germany prior to World War II. So a lot of what we talk about with, the Bank of International Settlements and the Young Plan and sort of these partnerships between banks to finance World War II, that the partnerships are with industrialists like General Motors. They bought Opel, which was the largest auto company in Europe, and Opel had a division that was also in aviation. So when you talk about like a Hermann Göring or a Dornberger, who later becomes the chief engineer of the Bell Aviation and Bell Helicopter, and then of course the Werner von Braun is so famous. They all were at Opel before. So when they came in paperclip, and I think they originally went to Wright-Patterson in Dayton before they went to Fort Bliss in Texas. They were part of the General Motors network going into World War II. That's something that I think is really an important point. And they also, a lot of people talk about the tetraethylene deal that Standard Oil of New Jersey was doing, with the Nazis for their Stuka dive bomber program. But that specifically was developed by the Delco and General Motors, which was and again, another very important point, General Motors and DuPont were the same corporation in that era. So GM and DuPont are the largest corporation in the world. So you have a man named Charles Kettering who is working on the tetraethylene at Delco, which he's originally from Dayton, which is why I believe that, Wright-Patterson and the Dayton, Ohio became a hub of aviation. Was not only the Wright brothers were there, but they also had guys like Harold Talbot, who was an early Air Force, head of the Air Force. He was partnered with a guy named Charles Allen Thomas, who was the chief chemist of the Monsanto company that became the director of Oak Ridge. They were all in Dayton originally, and they were all on tetraethylene. So General Motors, DuPont, and Exxon, which was Standard Oil of New Jersey, they partnered to sell the tetraethylene to the Luftwaffe. So you have these old relationships where it seems so shocking, like, well, how could the, Germans and the Americans be partnered? But again, General Motors owned 80% of Opel. So Opel is basically General Motors of Europe. This is in 1929 that they make that acquisition. So this is not, this is quite a while before World War II, where they've already, planted those seeds, and the roots are there between these partnerships. So, with specifically with the aviation, though, the Lockheed Martin, which becomes later a very important aviation company, based on things like the U-2, which was the Lockheed's U-2, became a big driver of world events as far as the shoot down with Gary Powers. That was, with Sputnik, is maybe those are the two kind of key events that led to the Cold War. So Lockheed was originally part of, it was owned by, it wasn't originally, but it was purchased by the Detroit Aircraft Corporation in 1927, I believe. And it was in Grosse Ile, Michigan, which is an island south of Detroit. And it was the directors of this Detroit Aircraft Corporation were Henry Ford, Edsel Ford, Charles Kettering, William Bushnell Stout, and Alex Dow, who was the president of Detroit Edison Company. And they're the ones that had not only Lockheed, but also the blimp Zeppelin company that was partnered with Zeppelin. I mean, they were part. I think it was Lakehurst, New Jersey, was where they made one of the big Zeppelin like air bases or whatnot. But they were they had the metal side aviation, but they also had the dirigible business, and that was Detroit Aircraft Corporation, and that was busted in 1933. That was part of the Guardian Union Trust collapse that happened in the state of Michigan, where Henry and Edsel Ford were asked to bail out the Guardian Union Trust Bank, which was an old Detroit bank in the Guardian building. They refused to do it. That bank collapsed, and then they had the banking holiday in the state of Michigan, which then led to the federal banking holiday in 1933, where then we get the FDIC, we get the SEC is created, where Joseph Kennedy is positioned as the first head of the SEC.
And doesn't Glass-Steagall come in right then?
Yeah, Glass-Steagall also. So
that's a very important point, because that's one of the big issues that we have today, is that and the Schiller and LaRouche folks are absolutely right. If we could reinstate Glass-Steagall, that would be a step back toward reality and away from this inevitable fantasy of technological serfdom that I spoke of earlier. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're covering a whole lot of stuff here, and I think I want to ask kind of a philosophical question here. Is these partnerships between Detroit and Ohio businesses, these old Northwest entities, and the budding National Socialist regime in the 30s in Germany, sounds like they were supporting the Hitler movement. In other words, they were providing him with arms. They were providing him with a means to rearm and a means to make war. and all the time they are aware of his philosophy and the horrors that could happen if they do rearm him. I sense, this cold capitalism that is so chilling and so injurious to our democracy and our sense of freedom in this country right now. But this cold, empiricism, the British empiricism, if you want to go that way, but it's also a totalitarian Nazi thing in which the state is everything. And if you got to get rid of the Jews, well, you got to get rid of the Jews. If you got to get rid of the deaf people, then if you have your scientists telling you, hey, it's genetic, you can't do anything about it. Well, gosh, we shouldn't let have blind people have children then, and let's also sterilize the people that have all kinds of diseases or all kinds of infirmities, and they went into that, and now we're looking at a potential technological medical serfdom in which we're told what we have to do on a worldwide basis. And it sounds very much like the program that Hitler had in terms of the state owns your body. And if we give up and let the state own our body, then we've fulfilled the dream of these uh, evil capitalist, anti-humanists from the 30s. And so I guess that turned into a speech by me, but it really troubles me to think of a Henry Ford
Yeah.
or
It's
any of these great leaders. It, there's two little acronyms that I've picked up and I like. It's uh, LIHOP and MIHOP. LIHOP is let it happen on purpose, and MIHOP is made it happen on purpose.
yeah.
Did they kind of let it happen on purpose, World War II?
We got to me the way I look at it is they they demoralized the Germans after World War One. They had the Weimar Republic, they had hyperinflation, they had girls prostituting themselves for a candy bar, or the stories that you hear, like it was. And again, these operations are horrible, but they destroyed the financial system of the Germans. And if your goal is to bring in a dictator or a strong man, or to get to convince people to do something, 10 years of depression and struggling and wondering if you're ever going to be able to provide for yourself or your family, or have a positive outlook. I mean, I don't know. I have great empathy for I mean, I know there's horrible things that happen in all wars, but I try to have empathy for these situations and look at them, because they are, when they say they're everything's a banker's war. They are they're bankers' wars. And the the bankers that destroyed the economy of Germany. And of course they used, you talked about Bernays. They made Kaiser Wilhelm, the worst, you know, um, just the worst man, until Hitler came along. And so again, like, the way I look at it is like, well, and he could have, I'm sure he was, did terrible things, but again, like, I wonder, what were they trying to get away from Leopold, and the what the Belgians were doing? Because you've got Herbert Hoover, who's seemingly partnered with all these, Warburg bankers, Rockefeller bankers, Rothschild bankers, the Schroders, the Sullivan and Cromwells, they're running this PR program of the Belgian war relief, and help, the Germans are putting babies on the end of a bayonet and whatnot. And again, like, they may have been, I don't know, but were they just trying to hype one specific country as being the villain, like we are right now, kind of like similar to what we're going through right now. And again, like I don't know the specific action, so it's hard for me to know. But Leopold also has the record of going into Congo and chopping the arms off of people that didn't harvest the rubber fast enough or didn't, dig the gold out of the ground fast enough.
But
And
let me stop you though, because when you brought Leopold in, I was totally I lost my footing in where we were going, because what what does that represent? Is that a different banking system you're talking about, or what?
he's the king of the Belgians. And the
Yeah.
Belgian relief program was based on abuse of Belgian people and the Germans going into the Belgium and raping the
Right.
Belgium. So you have the Belgian leader is Leopold, who's the um, first cousin of Queen Victoria. So he's right there with all the um,
He's a Saxe-Coburg too.
he's a Saxe Coburg. So again, it's and Kaiser Wilhelm is also first cousins with them all too. So it's that's why I'm just like I try not to like pick sides and be like I'm cheering for this group or whatever. I just try to analyze it because and look at what were the interests that they were serving. I mean, clearly when you have war, you need to um you need to have heroes and villains, and you typically want the hero to win, but is the villain like in control? I mean, you asked about like Biden, is he going to save the economy? And like I don't. My sense on Biden is that he's um so deeply compromised and just had a lot. I don't know. I don't like think that, oh well, if we had a different person in, but like historically looking at these things, like I just wonder because I know Germany had horrible track record in Africa as well. The Belgians had a horrible track record. The De Beers and we've talked about the Round Table and all the Milners and
Yeah.
you know so is the game where they just sit at a table and they spin the bottle and they say, okay, we're going to make, you're going to be the bad guy and we're all going to gang up on you and make you the supervillain of the thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, it
I
seems
think
like a lot of normal people have their lives destroyed over these things, so I don't want to like indicate that I don't think that the suffering and horrible things aren't real, but I'm just more trying to figure out, again, like why they do it, because if you've already controlled the assets going back to Venice or whatever, and you create the ports and you've controlled the commerce and you've had your trade companies going back hundreds, thousands of years, like is a play like busting somebody in the Silicon Valley Bank, in 2023, going to really matter if you already whatever overthrow through the Roman Empire and overthrew the Holy Roman Empire and got rid of the czars or whatnot and took all their stuff. Like it's I don't know. I mean
But
that's
don't you think that's just money laundering, though? I mean, for instance, and I don't know if this is true, but I saw a headline today that said that this SVB bank had given $75 million to Antifa.
yeah.
Well, how does that jive with taking care of your customers' money? And so it sounds to me like the board of directors or somebody that controls the board of directors said, hey, we need to support Antifa, and so they did, and there went the money. And there's probably a dozen or more examples of that in a bank like this, which is run by people who are politicized. They're favoring one side of the electoral process, and they're using that money to affect what happens in various places where Antifa can spend the money. and then the money's gone. And well, for whatever reason, no angels stepped in to refinance the bank this time, and so now the bank is like, I'm broke. I don't have that money anymore, and so I'm really, really sorry, but you're going to have to go, to the FDIC or wherever you go. But my point is that if somebody hadn't made the decision to send the money out to what are really unreasonable causes or bad investments, then the people's money would have been safe. But that's a political action as much as it is just a theft. So that gives you a bit of a more of a motive than just why does the rich person want another 100,000,
Hmm. Well,
political.
I look at like the Antifa is just, I mean, I just go to like, how did they run Gladio? Is it just, it's just a chaos operation? Like, is it just again, is this just sadly our information warfare using, action groups to create chaos and strategy of tension? And, I know we were with a lot of the Antifa action, we were getting into these autonomous zones, and are we going to bring in NATO troops, and are we going to give up the sovereignty of our local police and our national guards, or are we going to use our troops in these zones? And again, like, I don't know. I mean, I just hate, I hate thinking that there's somebody that's working in NATO or working in our psychological operations, and they're like that we're going to do this, but sadly I think that's what that ties into. I think it ties into Phoenix program and strategic hamlets, and you look at the the Shackley and Lansdale and those guys, and those, I think they're the ones that put down these kind of ideas, sadly, and that's what I think that ties into. So again, is it are they running special operations for it? I mean, if you're a banker and you've got a activist group that comes in and they're like, we need financing to buy uniforms and signs, and we're gonna travel, and we need food and places for our activists to stay, and you don't have a business model, I don't know who's going to sign off on that. It doesn't seem like that's a money making operation that a business would apply for money. It seems like that would be a charity or whatnot. But again, like I don't know the specifics of it, but I don't know. It to me it just seems like it just seems like, sadly, intelligence operations to me. All these things like Antifa.
Right. And how do you finance it? Well, you find a way to kind of siphon the money out of a bank. Look at Nugan Hand Bank. Look at all the drug banks that in the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands, the offshore tax havens. It's all money laundering, and it's all absolutely connected to the intelligence services. Five Eyes or Nine Eyes, if you like your James Bond version.
But if you're selling drugs, or you're trading in weapons, or you're doing overthrows of territories and gaining assets through conquest, that's at least I mean, it if you're financing that, at least there's a prize or whatever, as opposed to just we're going to go and cause chaos, or have a group that um is protesting or whatnot. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I
Well, if
hate.
you're going to have soldiers, you're going to have to pay them, right?
Yeah,
So you're going to have some income, and that basically is maybe the main reason is that you need to, replenish the bank kitty so you can pay your mercenaries.
yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
we have our Blackwaters or whatnot of organizations that are designed to do that, and they're hired by our military organizations, or and so again, like, it's these are these are the reasons why I have struggled with doing financial analysis because they're, again, that so much is off book, so much is black economy. You can speculate on it and try to figure it out, but as far as really understanding it, I mean, it's meant to be covert and hidden, so it's you
Oh
can't.
yeah. That's like, we're just speculating about this bank deal, but whenever the intelligence services are involved, then they can call on their experts to come up with a plausible deniability, and that's a legal requirement for CIA action to have plausible deniability. And so, how much do you spend on plausible deniability? It's a bottomless resource. If you're in that psychological manipulation business, or even just into the general psychology of how do you influence people on Facebook without, even being nefarious in any way, just doing your job, you're going to get paid. All of these psychologists are going to get paid, and Rand Corporation and all of the great think tanks in Stanford and everywhere else around the world are going to contribute their best thinkers to come up with plausible deniability. And that's why I think it's so hard to unpack things, like this current medical thing that's been going on since 2019. How do you unpack it when there's layer after layer after layer after layer of deception? And a lot of the actors that pop their heads up onto the, YouTube or wherever else, especially the ones that are obviously quite wealthy, um, they kind of ride in on their special horses and, sit down with their Dos Equis and look at you and tell you, I'm going to tell you the truth now. Um, all of these people are there as part, potentially, of just doing their part in the current plausible deniability scheme. And it's just frightening to try to think, how many layers can there be? I can peel back a layer and a layer and a layer and a layer.
Yeah,
But if you've got, the great minds of the intellects of the world working on how to keep me from figuring it out, I'm probably not going to be able to figure it out. But maybe you
well,
can.
I try my best to try to figure it out, but I feel like the tactics are they either just ignore you, or they some people will just attack you with the schizophrenia, or like, I feel like if you're from the Freud school, or the psychology, that it's you need your medicine or whatnot. That's a pretty common one. But I don't know. I I try to be very empathetic to people that are Professor Hamamoto wrote the book Servitors of Empire, and I think
Yeah.
that's a great model to use to try to understand how people can get in positions. But like I said, with the Weimar Republic, where people, of when they get desperate, or they can, they pick people that are ambitious, or driven, or maybe desensitized to treating people unfairly. But I do think that the plausible deniability, sadly, is a and also combining it with security clearances, or rules where they're legally allowed to protect national security by lying, or
Yeah.
misleading, or giving partial information, or
How
it's
about, how
it's
about never a straight answer in ASA?
yeah.
You know,
I mean,
you, you,
that's why I struggle. I don't feel like I don't have a I don't have any of those advantages, I feel like. So, but I do have the advantage that I know where I know where Henry Ford grew up, and I can learn what his relationships are, and I can follow along where they plug a lot of their assets from their from World War II into a Ford Foundation, and how they use that foundation to finance things like Rand Corporation. and to partner with a lot of NGOs. And I can study Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation and Hudson Institute and the Brookings Institute, and I can see who's been there, where they came from, how they got there, and so I feel like I can suss people out. But again, it's if you're working in a program, if you're like a Robert Malone, and you're clearly the front man for a huge operation, and you can just stick to your story, you can have a full blown support of thousands of um, either real people or bots that are supporting your messaging, or making it seem like it's just overwhelming consensus with what you're saying is accurate. There's not much you can do, because like I'm not interested in um, convincing people that what I think is right and that what's wrong, because I try to be understanding that I feel like most people, all people are unless they're in an operation and working, in these groups, which I don't think is a huge amount of people. But most people are a product of what did their grandparents teach them? What did their parents, what were their experiences? Like
Yeah.
what did your grandma tell you about being conservative or liberal? That's like what most people will go with. So I don't want to be the one to be like, well, what your grandma said is, BS and she didn't know and whatnot. Cause that's your whole life with that. And I don't, if, but people are very conditioned to want heroes. And Professor Yamamoto's talked about that with the whole superhero pro messaging that we've had, where you've got the good guys and the bad guys, and team sports where you cheer for your team and wear the colors and buy the merchandise and all that stuff. And like I get that. I mean, I was the kid that went to the University of Michigan football game when I was 3 years old, and I heard the band and saw the people and all the cheers. And I loved it. It was great energy, and I love that stuff. And it's very powerful. And it partially was part of my experience as to why I understand what Bernays was so good at, was tapping into that. Like, a lot of people are, there's alpha personalities, people that want to be the leader and respect. There's beta personalities, people that want to be cheering for the team and the group and feel like they're part of the right group and all that. And that, to me, that's it's very hard to break people out of that, even if you can understand that and diagnose it, to get people to go along with it or whatnot. It's a challenge. I don't know, but I keep trying to keep understanding more and more the best I can to make it helpful.
Well, you've been a tremendous help to me over the years now, David, and I'm really grateful for all the dedication that you have to your work. I love to know that somebody I can rely upon and trust, and has that real deep sense of ethics about what you're doing. And so I'm really grateful for tonight. I think we really kind of went deep on a few things, and you inspired me to make a couple of rants, if you want to call them those, which hopefully is a good thing, because sometimes the things that are a little bit below our surfaces, we don't voice them unless we get triggered to voice them. And I think this conversation has been a really good back and forth in that sense too. Um, you'll be back again next week with the great Bill Taylor from New Jersey, and for an update on what he's been doing, and check in with the two of you on a number of really interesting issues. So I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. And thanks for being with us tonight, David Cranmer Underdown.
Well, thank you, and I'm looking forward to it. And Bill Taylor, he's going to be happy to know that I had a Brookside school tour, so I learned a lot about the Booth family, and I know he's got a lot of Gibson Island Booth interests, so we can talk about the Booths.
All right, very good. And I'll see you guys tomorrow at 8 p.m. with Courtney Turner, our first interview with that podcaster, and she's going to be a lot of fun. So I look forward to that, and I'll see you then. Bye bye. Oh, by the way, before I close the broadcast, if you guys haven't uh, pushed the subscribe button or the like button or whatever buttons there are that you can push there, I'd appreciate it. I never asked for that, but I really do need to as we try to keep our visibility as high as we can. Thanks again.